Welcome to Psychotherapy Unfogged. My name is Mark Fielding. I'm a psychotherapist and relationship counsellor, and I've been in practice for somewhat over 15 years. I wanted to talk to you today about COVID. So we're 9 weeks, almost 10 weeks into the whole COVID situation, and I think people are handling it in their own individual ways. We all see, new experiences through our own, our own lenses, the lenses of our own experience. I think people initially were perhaps attracted by the novelty. Often with humans, although this is somewhat of a generalisation, novelty can be quite interesting. Things had really changed. We were kind of drawn into that. Our working practices had changed. We're spending more time at home. Some of us were furloughed. There was a lot going on, I think, to keep our attention. But now, as time has gone on, I think the initial feelings around COVID and perhaps the focus on change and the focus on what's going on have maybe drifted away and been replaced by a feeling of loss. I think a lot of us are experiencing loss of the lives that we had before. I think a lot of us are realising that the lives we had before that perhaps we all took for granted, were really great. And now, because our freedoms are changed, we can't go out as much, we can't see friends and family as much. We're really missing that life. And I think that life brings a lot of good feeling. There's a hormone called oxytocin. When we see family, when we see friends, when we hug, when we see partners, this oxytocin, arises in our body. It's a feel-good chemical. We feel good. Social connections as human beings are incredibly important. And I also notice perhaps a difference between introverts and extroverts during this crisis. I think introverts are perhaps, this is again somewhat of a generalisation, dealing with it probably a little bit better. I think for people that are quite high on introversion, spending a lot of alone time doing solo pursuits or pursuits just with a small number of people, reading, watching TV, listening to podcasts, etc., can be helpful. This is the kind of life that introverts often lead. And too much stimulation, too much socialisation for introverts, it can often be difficult and overwhelming. But I do notice that people that are high on extroversion are, really suffering. I think suffering from the lack of social connectivity, suffering from being out and about, being stimulated, seeing people, seeing friends, having novel experiences, and I think the loss narrative that we're all feeling, is creating incredible feelings of sadness for us all. I want to link in people with pre-existing kind of mental health conditions, perhaps people that were, suffering from depression or anxiety before the crisis started. Perhaps they're feeling worse. Perhaps the collective trauma, and I think that even though it seems an extreme way to describe what's going on, I think that is the right term for what's going on. We're all experiencing a collective trauma. We're in the midst of it. We're trying to cope. And I guess it goes without saying that people, that have been experiencing anxiety, depression, or other mental health kind of issues before are possibly going to be impacted by this extra thing that they have to deal with, more. And dealing with, the current situation is perhaps going to be even more difficult. I guess I want to talk about coping strategies. I think it's really easy, especially at the start, but I think probably the same thing is also true now, to just give up our coping strategies. Finding structure within a life that has very much changed is pretty difficult. But I think, structure and the coping strategies that a lot of us have in place, either consciously or unconsciously, that keep our mental health good, keep our mental health ticking over at a really good place. It's very easy to lose those. Things like social connectivity. Yeah, okay, we can't see people as much, the situation, although that's somewhat changing in week 9, but the situation has been against that. We only see, a few people. But I think connecting with others, on Zoom, Skype, remotely, I think is incredibly important. Remaining in touch, I think, and social connectivity as human beings is what makes us tick, and it's a massive source of our personal happiness, and that goes for introverts and extroverts. I guess it's just the difference is the amount, really. So, I think keeping connected with people, I think, is incredibly important. I mean, even the clapping on the Thursday, coming out and seeing all of your neighbours and that collective spirit, I think it has been really, really helpful for people. A lot of people use exercise as a coping strategy. Exercise for me, and and research also supports this, is one of the best things we can do for our mental health. It promotes well-being, it changes the brain, which I won't go into now, but in positive ways. Neurogenesis is one of those ways. When we exercise, research suggests we create more neurons in the brain. So very easy to give up exercise during the lockdown. Fear about going out might be playing into that. But I think if exercise has been supporting us and supporting our mental health, I think it's incredibly difficult we continue to do that. Now, whether that be exercise indoors, if perhaps you're shielding, you can't go out, there's loads of stuff online now with exercise routines. If you are able to go out, running, I think, is good. Gyms are obviously closed. I think a lot of people have been using gyms, to build up physical health, but, the byproduct is also, to really support mental health. I think long walks, running, just being out, I think, and taking exercise is tremendously therapeutic. If those walks and those runs can be in nature, a park, depending on where you live, a field, I think that's almost like a double whammy of goodness. You're pulling in the nature, but you're also taking exercise. And I think it's incredibly important to do that. I mean, other coping strategies. I mean, a lot of people use journaling. Journaling can be a really, really helpful coping strategy, especially for people with really, really busy minds. The mind will turn over and keep thinking about things. A lot of people find journaling really, really helpful, just externalizing all of their thoughts, putting them on paper and kind of getting them out of their mind and onto paper can be helpful. But, as I say, very easy to give up these coping strategies, these things that, are supporting us and helping us. Another one, meditation is also really good, particularly good for anxiety. So easy to just give it up, but with so much concentration on what's going on, and media, just really easy just to not bother, but I think it's important not to forget that these things are really, really helpful and we need to continue to do them. I guess I want to now move on to media. I think at the start of the COVID situation, everyone's watching media, and I don't want to be idealistic and suggest that people don't watch the media, because I guess we all need to be informed and know what's going on. But what I would say is I think it's incredibly important to be mindful of how much media we're consuming. I mean, I think a lot of us, most of us, all of us have anxiety around the situation, around catching COVID, around lots and lots of different things. And I think watching too much media and not mindfully controlling the amount of data in terms of media coverage of the COVID crisis that you're taking in, I think can really, really increase anxiety. It's almost hypnotic, isn't it, to watch the news and just watch, hours and hours and hours of different people, talking about this situation in lots of different ways. But I think it's important to be mindful of how much of this we're consuming, because the effect is, to create a lot of anxiety. And if we've already experiencing anxiety, or indeed if we have an anxiety disorder, this is not going to be helpful. I think sleep is obviously also really, really important. And if we're furloughed and we're not working, and I hear this from a lot of people, it's so easy just to get out of sleep hygiene and to go to bed late and to get up late. But of course, sleep hygiene is really important to mental health. So I think it's really, really important to keep these good habits that we had, that were supporting us previously going during the crisis, to try and, keep some kind of structure in terms of the structure that's supporting our mental health going in this time of global crisis and collective trauma. A lot of people are thinking about the future. There are people, obviously, with financial worries, worries about losing their jobs. There's a lot of anxiety being created around this situation. And of course, these are real and tangible things, real time, real world worries that people are worrying about. But again, I think it's important to manage the amount of airtime these worries are getting. Again, I don't want to be idealistic and suggest that we don't think about these things, we don't process them. But I guess mindfulness again may be helpful. If these are worries that we're not actually sure what's going on, our mind's just trying to trying to fill the gap that uncertainty is creating. I think using mindfulness to try and control our mind, I think, can be really, really helpful. So we're not endlessly churning over worries and trying to fill in the gap that, for all of us, the uncertainty has created. Because I think, allowing your mind, free range just to ruminate endlessly about these things is going to pull up a lot of anxiety. Think about them, sure, but I think managing your mind in terms of how much time you spend thinking about these things, I think, is also really, really important. I mean, in terms of trauma, I guess to finish on, something positive, as a therapist, I'm, a really big believer in post-traumatic growth. I've worked a lot with people with trauma over the years, and I see this a lot. People that have been through incredibly difficult experiences, that have been through traumas, and we're all going through a collective trauma now. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult at the time, and it takes a lot of time to process, and there are negatives, PTSD, anxiety, depression that can come as a result. But I do see also a spurt of personal growth when people that have experienced trauma move through, the PTSD, the effects of the trauma, work through it. They come out on the other side often really changed, their personal growth really, really accelerated, different view of the world, self-efficacy, really people feeling really empowered, taking control of their lives, and I think this may be something that happens with all of us, when we come out of this collective trauma, whenever that will be, perhaps we'll be changed, but perhaps some of that change will be positive. And I think it's important to remember that. Thank you.